district manager for the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife Fish and Wildlife Refuge. And she's also a presenter for the Becoming an Outdoor Woman program. She has come to our fall workshop and done waterfall ID for us. She's a wonderful educator, and I'm just very excited about this topic today. And then she also has a special announcement. We have a bus tour to see the Tundra Swans Tuesday, November 15th. It's on my bucket list to hit someday, but it's a wonderful bus tour to see the Tundra Swans along the Mississippi River down there. And they serve lunch, and they have a naturalist on board, so she'll be talking about that as well. So welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to Mary.
Thank you, Linda. Going to work on sharing my screen after our practice here. So hopefully everyone can see that okay. I can see it, so I'm guessing that's working. So thank you for joining us over your lunch hour. As Linda said, I'm the refuge manager for the Winona district of the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge. And I have three main goals today. One, to tell you a little bit about the refuge. Two, to tell you a little bit about Tundra swans and their migration. And then three, to try and convince you that it is worth your time to come down here and witness something that people travel around the world to see. Literally, people come here from around the world to see the Tundra swan migration. So we are going to, if my PowerPoint's not gonna go suddenly. So much for it's up and so it must be working. Okay. So this is an overview of what the typical Mississippi River looks like in our area. So the Upper Miss Refuge, and I'm going to take that down to Upper Miss Refuge, starts near Wabasha, Minnesota, where the Chippewa River comes in on the Wisconsin side, and that's in Upper Mississippi River Pool 4. And we travel downstream for about 260 miles, and we end at the Quad Cities between Illinois and Iowa. And we encompass about 240,000 acres in there. We pretty much go, we usually say railroad track to railroad track on the Mississippi River. And so anytime you come over to the Mississippi in between those areas, you're going to see part of the refuge. We have offices in all 4 states that we touch. And so the office here in Minnesota is located in Winona, which is where I'm at. The refuge was established in 1924. And one of its primary purposes was to provide a refuge and breeding place for things like migratory birds. And so the Tundra swans definitely fall into that category. And so if you're paying attention to 1924, that's not too far away. And so we're only about a year and a half away from turning 100, which is pretty exciting, and planning is well underway for how we're going to celebrate 100 years. Back in 1997, we were given the big 6 is what we refer to them to. And these are 6 things that refuges across the country can offer for the public as long as they're found to be compatible. And we are so large and we have so much wetland space and so much river space that we offer all of these opportunities to the public. And so a lot of people will get confused with the fact that we're called a refuge, but we do allow hunting. We have a very large waterfowl hunting population that comes here in the fall, mainly because we're a premier location in the upper Midwest to hunt canvasback ducks. But we get all ages coming hunting, but that doesn't deter the migration at all. Mainly because we offer what we like to call a string of pearls. And these are closed areas, no hunting zones and sanctuaries that occur along the entire length of the refuge, so that birds have a place where they can sit down and take a break, they can refuel, we have plenty of food, and then they can hang out in those closed areas as long as they want to. That usually ends when we ice up, so it's very dependent on the weather. This is kind of what we look like in the backwaters. You can see we've along the entire refuge, we've got almost 50,000 acres of marsh, so plenty of places for them to stop. This is a summertime photo. This is not what you will see in the fall. So by now the plants have started to senesce, and so all the energy has gone into the root system, and you're not going to see a lot of things standing above the water. You will see, you know, the cattails will stay above water. You'll see a few other things, but it's going to look like we have a lot of open water space. And what's going on when in the open water space is the birds are looking for tubers and roots and other things, snails on the bottom, things that they can get off from the bottom of the wetlands. And those are tubers, and you can see that same jug that Ranger Ed there is holding in your upper right-hand corner behind me on the desk. That is swans, Tundra Swan. Each Tundra Swan will eat 2 containers of those a day. And so with that hand picture in the bottom, those are kind of small ones. They can get really large. They're usually like golf ball sized, or they can even be a little bit bigger. And those are arrowhead tubers. The arrowhead's the plant on the left. But they're looking, the birds that are here are looking for tubers from other plants too. So there could be sago pondweed, wild celery. We have a plethora of vegetation out there that they're out there digging for and pulling those tubers out of the bottom. When we did our CCP, Comprehensive Conservation Plan, back in the early 2000s, is where the numbers that I'm going to show you came from. So these calculations were done quite a while ago, but at that time, it was estimated that we had 40% of the continent's waterfowl would come through the flyway, and so we get a big chunk of those birds stop at the refuge. And we get 50% of the world's population of canvasbacks. So those are the birds that I mentioned that this is one of the premier locations to come and try and hunt a canvasback duck. And we also get 20% of the eastern population of tundra swans. And tundra swans are what we wanted to talk about today. And so this picture is taken by he's a professional photographer and is able to get real close, but this is what you're gonna see if you go on the bus tour or visit the Brownsville Overlook. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So how did they get here? So the tundra swans are named for where they nest, and they nest in those yellow sections on the upper part of the map. That's the tundra. The number 13 kind of encompasses the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So they're starting in those upper tundra, subarctic kind of areas. That's where they nest. And then you can follow the areas. There's 2 populations, the western population and the eastern population. The eastern population comes here. And you can see that we're location number 19 is basically where they stop here for an extended period of time before heading to number 20 on the East Coast, which is the Chesapeake Bay. And then they go up to, from the Chesapeake Bay down the coast, and they end up a lot of birds on the North Carolina coast. The western population, as you can see, head to the western side of the United States to spend the winter. Yes, to spend the winter. So the whistling swans, I wanted to make sure I addressed that. If you have an older bird book, these are going to be called whistling swans. The name was changed. And if you have a newer bird book, or if you do a Google search, you want to do Tundra Swan as the newer name for them, but they're the same bird. So the difference, just a few things to compare tundra swans to trumpeter swans. The bird behind me is a tundra swan. You can see it's pretty large, and I have it next to a coot. A lot of people are familiar with coots, just to give you an idea of the size difference. But then, of course, a trumpeter swan would be even larger. They weigh a little bit more. They have an even bigger wingspan. The big difference that people are always looking for is, if you can see the yellow spot on the bill of the tundra swan behind me, most of the tundra swans are going to have that. Not always, but most of the time. Whereas the trumpeter swans will have a solid black mask. Their young look a lot alike. They're gray. They have a pinkish bill. And then the big difference that we get right now is when you see them. So the tundra swans are migrating right now. And they're starting to trickle into the Mississippi River. We have small family groups of them showing up. They are only here in the fall. This is the only time you're going to see them. In the spring, they're in a big hurry to get past us, to get closer to their nesting ground, so that when it's warm enough for them to actually lay eggs and start nesting, they can. So we see them in the springtime, but we might see a couple family groups, but we're not going to see the concentrations that we have now. Whereas if you're seeing swans in the summertime here in Minnesota, those are going to be trumpeter swans. They're nesting across the state, across the Midwest, and you can find them, in the spring. They're going to be here year round as long as they can find open water in the wintertime. So just to show you what that looks like, the swan on the left is a tundra, the swan on the right is a trumpeter. And it's kind of hard to tell, but you can just see even by human size comparison that the trumpeter is a lot bigger and it has a much longer neck. And that's important for how we're going to tell them apart. These are a family group, so you have 2 adults and 2 young in there. The young the cygnets will molt through that gray phase and gradually become white. And then their bills and feet, you can't see their feet in the picture obviously, but their bills and feet will go from the pink to the black over time. So this is what you're going to see. When you come down here looking for tundra swans in the fall, this is what you'll typically see out on the Mississippi River. There's going to be a lot of swans. You are not going to be telling them apart by a yellow spot by the eye. What you're going to be able to tell them apart by is their sound. Almost all of these swans are going to be tundra swans, but there could be a family of trumpeters that will join in with them. And because so many tundras are coming through the area, they tend to land in places where the trumpeter swans have spent the summer nesting. So you will really the only way you're going to pick the trumpeters out is you're going to get used to hearing this song, and it is truly a song of coo, coo, coos of tundra swans, and it never stops. When you have 20,000 swans talking constantly, it never stops. But your ear will pick up that really deep sound of a trumpeter because the trumpeters will talk as well, and you will be able to pick them out by sound. And that has to do with that longer neck and the way they're built. They have a much deeper tone when they call out. And that's how you're going to pick them out, and you're going to look towards that direction and maybe be able to figure out which one they are, but maybe not. So these swans, the tundras are coming from the Arctic. They can fly at 26,000 feet. It's said they can fly up to 100 miles an hour, especially if they get a good north wind pushing them in this direction. But it's just an amazing sight when they go overhead. You're going to see strings and strings of tundra swans going from the north to south, and they'll be calling the entire time. It's the most amazing thing you're ever going to see. So we ask if you're going to look for swans. They usually visit us for about a month. That's pretty typical. Second week of November is peak. If you want to see a lot of swans, come the second week of November. It's almost like clockwork. And then they will leave for the Chesapeake Bay when the ice forms in our backwaters and they can't find a lot of open water anymore. And then, like I said, they don't stop here in large numbers in the spring. What you're seeing in this picture is another from the Brownsville Overlook, which is going to be a highly recommended location to go look for swans. And you can see how close they are in the front, and then you can see all of that white in the back. And so you're going to see swans spread across the river, but a lot of them are going to be at great distance, but that does not take away from just the experience of being as close as you're going to be and being able to hear all those swans. So we're going to take a little tour. As Linda mentioned, we do have a bus tour that makes a round trip from Winona, and we'll go to these locations. But if you live close enough or you just want to do your own drive, you can get this information off from our friends webpage, which there'll be a link to. And there's also, if it works right, a Google Maps route that's at the bottom of this slide that should take you to each location if you need assistance while you're driving. So first stop, and we're gonna say we're coming out of the Twin Cities or some point north of us. Your first spot's gonna be at Weaver Bottoms, which is Highway 61. You'll come on Highway 61 and go through the little town or by the little town of Weaver. And then a couple miles below that, you're gonna see a cemetery on your right-hand side. You wanna take the frontage road that takes you to that cemetery. That gets you a little elevation and it lets you look across the marsh. Great spot. Get you off the highway so it's safer than a lot of people. We see a lot of people stop on the highway. You know, they're so excited that they saw us, they're seeing swans and they swing open the doors and we get calls about that. So please go up to the overlook or the access road to the cemetery, get you out of harm's way. You can get a great look from up there. Of course, you need to bring binoculars, and if you have a spotting scope, even better. The next stop is down at Brownsville. So Brownsville, Minnesota, you would continue south from Weaver and you'll end up going through La Crescent, Minnesota. And then Brownsville will be your next little town that you hit. And just south of Brownsville, you can't miss it. It's a overlook that was built specifically for people to see swans. It's a big pull off on the side of the road, and it is always stocked with spotting scopes so that you can use the ones that are there. And on the weekends during swan season, there will be interpreters available most of the time if you stop at this overlook. So it's right on the railroad tracks, which is kind of hard to see, but there's railroad tracks running along the bottom there. So when the trains come by, you can't see the swans, but they go by pretty quick. And the swans will usually stay right there when the trains go by. But you can see from this picture how close you will be to swans if you go to the overlook in Brownsville. The next stop is on the Wisconsin side. It's just upstream of the Brownsville location. You're going to want to go back into La Crescent and cross the bridge there to get to the Wisconsin side. If you go south, it's going to be a long way to find another bridge. So it's best to just go back to La Crescent, cross into La Crosse, and then you'll go down south of La Crosse to the town of Stoddard. And this is going to be just above Stoddard. There's another pull off, great location. You can stop there and look at the swans from the other direction. Because you remember the one picture where the swans were kind of in the background, this will get you closer to them on that side. Our next stop is the visitor center in Onalaska, Wisconsin. Nice visitor center. You can see from the map in the middle or the aerial photo on the left in the middle. They have hiking trails. You can take the hiking trails. One of the trails will lead you across the road to an observation deck there where you can look at Lake Onalaska. Lake Onalaska, known for concentrations of waterfowl in the fall. So great viewing from there. And then the bottom picture, that's the visitor center. So you're looking for a big green building out on the prairie. And if you want to go to the visitor center, I would call ahead just to see what their hours are because they're constantly changing due to conditions. But as long as the visitor center is open, there's going to be a staff member there that can answer any questions you have. And then as long as you're heading back upstream, you might as well stop at Trempealeau National Wildlife Refuge. Beautiful little refuge. It has a driving tour. It's open sunrise to sunset. The driving tour will take you to an observation deck where you can look over that pool that's contained, that kind of straight line that's running on the air photo from the left to the right. That's a railroad track. And so the water within that pool is very calm and they get a lot of birds that stop in there and spend a lot of time in that pool. So here's the Swan Watch Bus Tour. It's going to be Tuesday, November 15th from 9 to 2:30, and 9 o'clock it leaves Winona, comes back at 2:30. It's $35 a person, and that includes your box lunch. You do need to make reservations, and you can do those on our friends webpage, or you can call me directly if you're not comfortable with using a webpage or using your credit card for PayPal, which is how they take payment. So here's the links. Hopefully those links will show up in the chats as well, or in the chat box. You can also, like I said, contact me directly if you'd like to, but I certainly encourage you to come out. You will never forget the experience of listening to the swans. It is the most amazing thing that you can do all year. And I can say that every staff member, regardless of how long we've been here, that is a highlight, and we all go to see the swans too. So take advantage of it. If you're close enough, you need to make the voyage in the fall. So that is the end of my presentation, and I'm willing to take any questions that people might have.
Great. If you have a question, go ahead and type it into the Q&A, and then I'll ask Mary those questions. Right now, there aren't any questions, but we had a ton of questions for Mary earlier, so
Right.
I'll bring up those as we're waiting. Oh, here you go. Thank you. I believe I saw some resting in fields around here in Garrison Brainerd area. So you said they're starting to trickle down, so they might be stopping through.
Right. Yep. That's probably Tundra Swans.
Okay. Yeah, because there's a bunch of trumpeters on our little wetland back here, but There's another question. Try to put them in the Q&A, but this one came into the chat. See, I lost it. I think it was something about, will the low water affect viewing this year?
So no. So the interesting thing about swans, so I showed you the picture of the vegetation, and then I said, when you come here now, it's going to look like it's all open water. The fun part about watching swans now, when it's like open water, is, well, when you can see them because they can't hide in the vegetation as much, although there's still plenty of vegetation out there right now. But if you watch them, if you take a little bit of time and watch them, what you're going to see happen is they're going to kind of almost stand up in the water, and they're kind of moving back and forth. And what they're doing is they're paddling underwater with their feet, and they're digging in the bottom of the riverbed. So they're digging through the muck down there, and they're dislodging those tubers. And then after they do that little gyration for a little while, you'll see that then they'll put their heads underwater, and they'll be underwater for a while. And then if you watch them, you're going to see them pull a tuber up and swallow it. So that's what they're doing. They have those big feet, and you can see that big foot behind me back there, but they have these big feet. And when they leave in the fall, the river bottom is a series of giant craters that have been created where every tundra swan has been sitting and eating. And remember, they need to eat about 5 pounds of food a day, if not a little bit more. And so that's a lot of digging that they're doing out there. So we have to make sure that there's a lot of food on site for them. And I say we need to make sure, as long as the river's cooperating with everybody, the low water will be great for them because they'll be able to reach other areas where they normally perhaps couldn't reach because it was too deep.
Okay, so you don't think the low water is going to be any kind of an issue for them then?
No, it's probably going to help them.
Okay. Here's some more questions coming in. What are some of the other birds we'd see during that second week of November?
If you open up your bird book and look up dabbling ducks, you're going to see almost all of them. So mallards, wood ducks, green-winged teals, blue wings might still be here. Pintails, widgeon, gadwalls, we get them all. We'll also get the divers will come in, the diving ducks. The diving ducks you're not going to see as close. They need the deeper water. So if you go to the overlook at Brownsville, you will sometimes get some divers right there where the swans sit, but they're usually going to be a little farther out. And that's going to be ringnecks and scaup, canvasback. We get just about everything here. The divers will be, like I said, out farther, and they're probably going to be in large rafts of ducks. And so when you look across the river, you're going to see the little bumps of dark color out there, and that's going to be diving ducks.
Okay, great. The next question is, someone joined late, but she was wondering if the driving tour map has the same info addresses as your slides.
Yes, it does. That is, I just took that right off the website and pulled it over and added to it. So it's the exact same slides that you should see on the website.
Okay. What should we do if we find a dead swan?
So dead swans, and you can, they show up here and there. Call your conservation officer. That's generally the best bet, and they can come and pick it up, or they'll pass it on. If they're not available, they can pass it on to either DNR or Fish and Wildlife Service staff. We pick up several of them every year too.
Okay, and there's no hunting season for tundras in Minnesota, correct?
Correct. Not in Minnesota, but in adjoining states there are.
Okay. And let's see, this question, I think you answered it, but where do the Minnesota swans winter?
So they head for the East Coast, and they end up in the Chesapeake Bay and along the coast down to North Carolina. The amazing thing about the swans when they leave is pretty phenomenal. So it's about a 4,000-mile trip from Chesapeake Bay up to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And they do that in the spring. And then when they're coming back, and they make these few stops, and we're one of the stops. And we're one of the few locations, you can get this many swans at one time. They make this stop, and they hang out here because we have food. They're in a place, they're in the closed areas, so they're in places where they're not getting disturbed. And they'll hang out until it starts to freeze. And we could have 10, 15, 20,000 swans sitting there. one day, and then we'll get a really nice strong west wind, and it freezes overnight, and you can go back there the next day and there'll be a handful left because they've all gotten up and they've left and they've gotten on that good west wind, and it's pushing them over to the Carolina coast, and they will all disappear at one time. So one day we can have that many, and the next day we have none. And it's just the most amazing thing. And there is some, I don't know if it's all been documented, but we've always told people in the past that they're able, if they get a good enough west wind, they can make that trip in the evening and end there the next day on the Carolina coast. There's some people who dispute that. Sounds like something that needs more research probably, but they get there very quickly. And so then they spend the winter there. But it's just a phenomena to see all of those birds get up and leave. That's another experience you would remember forever.
Huh. And you were saying earlier that they kind of tended to fly more towards dusk or evening.
Yeah, we tend to see them traveling a lot in the evening. That's in Winona. We usually get the text messages and the calls that say the swans are in, and that usually is occurring later in the day, into the evening. They're doing a lot of moving, but you can hear them moving, and that's what people hear is they can hear the calls coming in from the swans as they're migrating because they continuously talk. It's just the most amazing thing.
So Roberta said that she's had the pleasure of seeing the swans in Weaver several years ago. It was impressive. The swans also used to hang out near Alma by Reichs Park.
Yep,
There,
Rick's Lake.
okay, there was a period of time when they wouldn't stop there. What was the reason for that? And do they return there now?
Yeah, so we discussed Rick's Lake a little bit earlier, just our practice team here. And so Rick's Lake is just north of Elma, Wisconsin. And that used to be the spot to go see swans. There's a big observation deck that was built there, and there were interpreters there all the time. And then unfortunately, the dynamics of Rick's Lake changed. And a big flush of sediment came in. It changed the vegetation. And the swans stopped going there. There just wasn't the right food source for them anymore. There's still a lot of aquatic vegetation in there, but it's not what they want to eat. And so you can stop at Rick's Lake. You'll see a dozen, maybe a couple dozen swans, depending on if they've decided to stop, but it is no longer the premier location. Weaver's pretty good. We don't have a really nice observation point to see Weaver. And so, Brownsville is the spot to go see swans.
Okay, let's see. I'm looking for new questions down here. Large population of snow geese have damaged the ecosystems on the tundra. Have tundra swans contributed to the overharvest on the tundra? And is there any risk of swans and other waterfowl overfeeding to the point of damaging aquatic plant populations in the Mississippi?
I'm going to go with no. We're not in damage of having them overeat while they're here. I'm not overly familiar with the tundra. I did talk to a friend who works at one of the refuges in Alaska, and it sounds like the tundra swans are holding very stable with their population, the eastern population and the western population. So there's been about 120,000 eastern population swans up on the tundra, and they're spread out. If you remember the map, they cover a much broader range of the Arctic Circle area than the snow geese do. And so in my just discussing this a little bit with him, I was trying to make sure I got the right refuge where they were nesting in Alaska. It doesn't sound like there's been any issues with the tundra swans and degrading the tundra.
Okay, great. Another question, how does their food change? The tundra here and the East Coast. Is the East Coast, they seem to eat different food, farmers' crops?
Yeah, so they'll spend a lot of time in fields on the East Coast looking for scattered grain, but they're also going to be looking for plant roots in the water as well. So they can also, if they need to, they'll pick up snails or small crustaceans of some kind. So they have a varied diet. It's just that while they're here, they're primarily looking for the roots and tubers of plants.
Okay, I don't see any more questions coming in. I don't know if Cassie has any that came directly to her. I think they've all been answered. But it's what great information. I was telling her that I was looking at an old bird book and it was only the Whistler swan was listed, but that is the same as the Tundra swan if you have an old book. Benji, is there some other question you see?
I saw one in the chat about will the low water levels affect viewing this year?
Yeah, we answered that one already. Yeah.
Oh, see, I missed it.
So Benji, the answer is no. It should actually maybe improve it a little, concentrate them a little bit more and open up more areas for them to eat.
So just to
How about-
recap, how many thousands of birds are going to be there within that month?
Well, now we can never predict Mother Nature, but typically we have about 30,000 swans spread across the refuge. And when I say spread across the refuge, they really, so that weaver location is good, they'll land, upstream of that, so in the Wabasha area, but they're looking for those nice backwater marshes. So they'll land over in what we call Big Lake, which is on the Wisconsin side of Pool 4 by the town of Nelson. There's just not a good place to see them over there. So we don't like to send people in that direction, but as you're driving along, you'll notice them there. And then they concentrate through the Weaver area, kind of Lake Onalaska, Pool 7. There's not a great place to get real close to them there. There is the observation deck at the visitor center where you can look from, but you're not going to get as close as you do when you go downstream to Brownsville, Minnesota, or even to the Shady Maple overlook by Stoddard. And then the swans they concentrate in there. They hit pool 9 a little bit, but pool 8 is really the spot, and that's where Brownsville is, where the swans like to sit. And they find good resources. They're undisturbed there for the most part. And so that's, the biggest recommendation is that's a good safe spot. It's been built specifically for this purpose to get people off the highway, and you get so close to them that it's an experience you will remember forever.
Okay, another question came in. The other places in Minnesota where the swans gather in numbers, or is it mostly just the refuge they stop in to eat?
The refuge is the biggest concentration spot that I know of. And so if anyone is out there, they can correct me on that. We tell people to come to the Mississippi River, and it doesn't matter if they're calling, from California and want to come see the swan migration. This is where we tell them to come.
Okay, well, I think that's, wait, I think there might be another question. Hold on here. Oh, no. Yeah, I just want to let people know, it's like, what a wonderful resource we have here in Minnesota, that we have a migrating flock of birds that come through and an opportunity to see those right in our backyard. I asked Mary about this weekend. It's supposed to be a nice weather weekend this weekend. And she said, nah, there'll be some swans, but it won't be the big ones like you'll see like that second week of November. But it's a great resource for our citizens here to go look at that bird. And the refuge staff offer this wonderful opportunity to do the bus ride with a naturalist for $35. It includes lunch, round trip. It will fill up quickly. So if you're interested in that, go to the Friends of the Refuge website or call Mary directly and sign up for that bus tour. I know it's on my bucket list to do before too long. So another question just came in too. Anne wants to know, do swans follow rivers from the Arctic all the way to Chesapeake Bay?
No. So, you can Google swan migration, Tundra Swan migration, and you'll see that they cross a lot of prairie and tundra areas as they come here. And if they make some stops, but they typically the weather moves them. And so if we get good, what you want to look for is good freezing temperatures in Canada and some nice north winds to go with that. And when that happens, they'll usually be here in a day or two. What they like to slow down for is the cygnets. So you have to remember that they're traveling a lot as a family group, and those cygnets were just hatched in like June, and now they're being asked to make a 4,000-mile flight. And that's a lot to ask of a young bird. And so they will, the cygnets can fly at about 90 days or so. So it takes, they want to spend as much time as they can up on the tundra to get those young birds ready to fly and exercised enough and strong enough to try and make the flight. And so a lot of those young birds don't make it. It's just a very long, treacherous, arduous flight to get to the wintering grounds. But they cross country. They're not following rivers or streams or lakes to get cross country. They're just making the most direct flight that they can.
Okay, another question came in. Any idea why swans don't feed in fields in Minnesota like they do out east, and why they don't stop at other refuges in Minnesota?
They do stop in fields. You will see a lot of it, the field has to be harvested, obviously, but we see them all over in fields here too. It's just that at some point, when you start getting a dusting of snow, or the fields are getting all dished up, then they tend to move more and concentrate more into the river, as opposed to sitting out in the fields. But if you drive around the countryside, within the migratory path that they're coming in, you'll see them land in fields too.
What is the expected temperature range the second week of November, like the highest and lowest?
I have no idea, but I can tell you, check the weather, because even if it's nice and sunny, it's cold because you're next to the river, and there's always going to be a breeze coming off the river, and you need to dress appropriately. It's usually raining, tends to turn up for some reason when you decide it's the day to go. So just dress for the weather. It's worth it. It might be a little wet, might be a little cold, might be a little windy, but it's still worth the trip.
Someone asked, how long do the swans live?
I think free flying tundras can get up to about 20 years. And so they're a long-lived bird, and they are one of those species that mates for life. And so if they lose a mate, then they have to find a new one, typically over the winter time when they're on the coast. They'd be looking for a new mate, but about 20 years.
Okay, and someone asked again the difference between the tundra and the trumpeter. You said the little yellow dot on the bill versus
Yeah.
the.
So if you can see the bird behind me, Tundra Swan, there's that little yellow lure in front of his eye. And like I said, you're not going to see that for the most part, because swans are going to be at a distance. And so it's really the vocalization that's going to make it the easiest to tell them apart. Because like I said, I don't know what it is, but swans never stop talking. I don't know when they sleep, but they're always talking. And so you're going to hear the trumpeter swan when it's in a whole flock of tundras. That voice is so distinctive that that's what you'll use to pick them out.
And their neck length and size is smaller than the tundras too, or trumpeters.
Yep,
Okay.
trumpeters are the bigger of the two.
Yeah. All right, I think that's all the questions. Benji, you don't see any more that came into you directly?
No, I don't think so. I know there was one about, I think you answered it, if there was any places closer to the Twin Cities. I don't know if the Mississippi Wildlife Refuge up in the Twin Cities has tundras that stop in or not.
Yeah, so Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge is the one that has a visitor center in Bloomington. They don't, they're not going to get the concentrations of swans. They'll probably get some swans that stop there. Locating them and getting a place to view them from could be an issue. Probably easiest down river, more near the Shakopee area would be a spot to go look for them. That's still part of the refuge, and you can probably get a little more open space there and look around a little bit more.
I was just down there this weekend and we didn't see any, but like you said, they're just starting to trickle in. So
Right, trickling in, and I'm not for sure where they, if they do stop, where they would stop on the Minnesota Valley Refuge, but it's certainly worth looking around, because if the swans aren't there, there's certainly other waterfowl there that's well worth the effort to go and look for. And unless the name has changed, the Black Dog Power Plant, just outside of Bloomington, if I'm getting my directions right, that used to be a great place to go look for waterfowl in the fall too.
Okay, and Black Dog is over by that Burnsville area.
Yeah,
There aren't like great viewing platforms, so like what you have
no,
down.
And there's
Yeah.
something really cool about seeing that many of them in one place that it is an experience you'll remember. So
yes.
And Winona, to get down to Winona, it's about an hour and a half from the Twin Cities. It's not too far, right?
Right, yep, it's about an hour and a half from the south side of the cities and, so a couple, 2.5 from the north side. But what a beautiful drive. We still have a little bit of color. Our bluffs are usually hardwoods, and so the oaks are hanging on to their leaves yet, even though it's been windy. And the oak trees are looking very nice this year too. So, bringing that Highway 61 downriver is going to be a beautiful drive. And this weekend, if you want to come, because it is going to be a beautiful weekend, certainly do that. And I will promote the National Eagle Center in Wabasha. If you haven't stopped there, that's a great spot to stop and see eagles up close. And it's right on the banks of the Mississippi, so you can overlook the refuge from there. It is the main channel, so not the best place to see birds. But once you're in Wabasha, it's a close drive. You can take the bridge, Highway 25, that goes over to Wisconsin from Wabasha. You will see birds along that area. And then if you head down Highway 35 on the Wisconsin side, that'll take you by the Big Lake closed area, which is just downstream of Nelson, south of Nelson. Not good spots to pull over and park, but you can still get some really nice views, and you'll see if there's swans here just by going by Big Lake.
Okay, great.
I see there's one more in the chat that my friend Heather, so you can call her out. She was unable to find the map on the Friends website. Is she looking in the right location? Heather, if you can't find the map on the website, please visit Mary or send Mary an email and she can get a map to you for the auto route there too.
Yeah,
So
so if I am recalling, it's at the top on the Friends website. It'll say something about Swan registration or Swan events or something. And it's one of two things. One of the things that drops down from that is the bus tour, and then the other one is the driving your own route tour.
And Mary's number is right on the screen there. So if you are interested in signing up for the bus tour, you can call Mary or go onto that Friends site and pay via PayPal, I believe it is. Or
Yep.
you can credit card with Mary directly. But it's a great opportunity right in our backyard. Going to be happening soon. So it's a great opportunity to see something spectacular. And then I just want to end next Wednesday, we're going to be doing another presentation. It's called Preserving Your Harvest. So our next Minnesota Outdoor Skills and Stewardship series will be Preserving Your Harvest. And I run the Becoming Outdoor Woman program. If any women out there are interested in our winter workshop, that'll be January 20th. So the registration will be coming online pretty soon for that. So January 20th at Osprey Wilds in Sandstone. Otherwise, I want to thank Mary for giving your time today and giving us this presentation about the Tundra Swans. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're going to go end the presentation now.